In Ranger School, the Florida phase is your longest FTX. It's 10 days straight, and you're not showering for that entire time. You don't even notice you smell. What does it feel like to take a human life? Do you have any regrets?
We found him kind of out in the courtyard, like with a weapon in his hand, being like, he's like, I gotta go home or something bad's gonna happen. Welcome back, Fire Team, to Shift Fire, the exploration and appreciation for all things military culture. I am Israel Wright, one of your hosts, and with me, the other half of this dynamic duo,
Cameron Fath. What's going on, folks? Welcome to an episode of Interrogating Cam and Israel, where we answer your questions as best as we can.
We appreciate all of the comments that you have left in the comment section, and we are happy to engage with you and answer any questions that we can. I mean, some, if we don't know, I'm just gonna say I don't know.
Before we dive into these awesome questions, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up on the latest and greatest from all things Shift Fire. But before we answer these questions, I know a lot of you are wondering, hey Cameron, hey Israel, what are those amazingly awesome t-shirts you are wearing on your perfect Greek god bodies? They are the official Shift Fire merchandise that is available to you. Yes, you. Go ahead and follow the links prompted below to see how you can get your hands on these awesome t-shirts. But you know, questions are cool, but we really want to know, what's your 5 mile? Let's start answering some questions.
Hiya! All right, Cameron, the first one is for you. Going to reach down in this vintage World War II helmet.
Yes, sir. All right. Sam B wants to know, how much of an issue is drinking or drugs in the military, specifically when you deployed? Alcohol is a big thing in the military. Many servicemen and women enjoy drinking their weight in beer and liquor on the weekends because, hey, when you work hard, you like to play hard. Sometimes it gets a little over the top, and I'm not going to act like the military is a perfect place where, you know, drugs don't exist. Yes, they do exist in the drugs, which is supposed to be a monthly urinalysis test to determine that you're not abusing any drugs that are on the unauthorized list. But you know what? To me, the military is a drug, and I get high every day.
I get high on freedom! Obviously, drinking is kind of a regular thing for a lot of dudes. It's a way that they would relax, you know, go to barbecues and stuff like that with your team. It was a problem for a few dudes, and there were actually some consequences that got handed down as a result of some drinking and driving and things like that. So you got to be careful, you got to be responsible. Make sure you have a battle buddy.
Make sure you take accountability of all your men, because we used to have a saying in Ranger Regiment that the biggest killer of Rangers is a DUI, because if you get one, you will be kicked out. And it happened to a lot of guys. It's important to understand that you're not immortal, that, you know, consequences will follow if you're abusing alcohol, and it's also not the best for your body, especially if you're trying to stay at the top tip shape that you can. Alcohol is not going to help you, but you know, it doesn't happen as long as you enjoy in moderation, enjoy responsibly. Hell, I'll drink a beer with you.
All right, man.
All right, Israel, you are next. What question are we going to answer?
Spirits of the Army.
Yeah, get there nice and deep black.
This question is from Zachary Guek.
I call him a Guek.
This is from Zachary G. Are you allowed to bring your own gear, like a foot care kit, for selection? All right, I guess I'll talk about Special Forces Assessment Selection. You can talk about RASP. Okay, so you're not allowed to bring any personal stuff to selection unless they give you, I think as I recall correctly, they have like a packing list of, you know, basic toiletries and things like that. You were asking about foot care specifically. I seem to remember something about like Arm & Hammer, foot powder, that kind of stuff. I think that was allowed, but nothing beyond like the basic packing. And then they would do inspections and stuff like that, and you were severely penalized if you brought any kind of extra stuff. Except for that dip. Always allowed to have that dip. Can't have anything else, but you can have dip.
No contraband. When you're going through, you know, a selection such as RASP, you're gonna receive a packing list, and whatever's on that packing list is like no what you're gonna bring. Of course, foot care products, I definitely think if they're on that authorized list, you're able to bring it, but sometimes they do inspections, and if you're caught with these things, like for example, alcohol, I knew a couple guys that kept a 40 or a 6-pack in their foot locker during RASP. They did an inspection and ended up getting kicked out of the course for that. So
it's risky, man.
Yeah, if you're intending to do any of these selections and you end up getting there, make sure you read the packing list, make sure you consult the cadre of what you can and can't have, and you abide by that, or, you know, hide it really well. All right, boss, you're up next. What question will we answer next?
We're about to find out. Get in there, get in the netting. All right, here we go. I'm gonna butcher this name. You know what, I just wanna say, I really appreciate our international cast of characters, our international fans. Even though I'm an uncultured swine and I can't pronounce his name correctly.
Try your best.
Arif Karad, the barbarian. All right, we know he's a barbarian, so.
Okay, that's
like
good.
his words, not mine, all right. Would you rather fight in a blizzard, A sandstorm or heavy rain? Oh, I like that.
I would absolutely rather fight in heavy rain.
Heavy rain, why?
In a sandstorm, you have to wear eye protection, you have to wear a face covering. It hurts like a motherfucker because you're being pelted by sand.
Yep.
Not to mention visibility is limited. In heavy rain, you can still get a little bit of visibility. And then in a blizzard, obviously, you're gonna have to go through some sort of cold weather training, and you're gonna be fighting in something that's extremely cold, and weapon manipulation is gonna be challenges.
I think I'm gonna say blizzard because I'm assuming a certain level of training in these different environments off the bat. You know, everything's basically already cold, so I'm not worried about like sleet or anything like that. Weapon manipulation, I'm imagining that I have some training with that, and I'm probably gonna be, I got the thin gloves or whatever, you know.
Never assume, because it just makes an ass out of you and me.
This is a fake scenario that I'm gonna set myself up for success in this fake scenario. Rain, I'm just thinking like, man, get that trench foot, you know, the cold, wet.
See, the thing is, I've been soaking wet before, and I've had to train in like massive rain.
I've been soaking wet before too.
Yeah, I'm like, I would rather prefer that than be like just in the cold, because when you wear snivel, you're limited in movement too, because the second you start moving a lot, you're gonna start sweating.
And you're exerting a lot of energy because just moving around through the snow.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I was like, yeah, I'll fight in rain any day.
You know what? I'm gonna change my answer to rain.
No, you can't do that.
Nope, too late. Hey, scenario question, fake question, real, changing of the mind.
Okay.
All right,
next
now
question. I want this one, because I said so. What was the most poignant moment during your tours? I think saving lives was the coolest thing I ever had to do. I remember there's one story that we were working out in the gym, me and the medic at the time, and we heard the bell ring and we had a casualty come in, and he literally died on the table. So we like stopped working out, went in there, grabbed a defibrillator. We started doing chest compressions on him and literally brought him back from the dead.
Wow.
Yeah, and then right afterwards, once he stabilized, we went back and finished our set. That moment will sit with me for the rest of my life, because that was like, wow.
There are certain situations that make you just feel really powerless. And we had a soldier who was with us. He heard about some really, I'm not gonna give away the details, but some really rough stuff happening involving his kids back in the world. He felt so powerless. He couldn't do anything about it, and we talked to him about it, and he was really depressed and stuff like that, and it got really bad. Like, we found him kind of out in the courtyard, like with a weapon in his hand, being like, and he's like, I gotta go home or something bad's gonna happen. You know? It just stuck with me, man, because that actually kind of made me glad that I wasn't married and had any kids when I was on deployment, because
that's a challenge in itself.
That's its own set of emotional challenges. You know, you're over there trying to do your job, and you're thinking about what your kids and your family are going through back at home.
And you're powerless because you can't do anything, because you're all the way, you know, half across the world.
Exactly, yeah. So that was a pretty powerful moment, and I think about that often, so. Oh, thank you. Joe Casey. If you could go back and serve during any conflict throughout history, what would it be, and why is it World War II?
Actually, Vietnam, baby. Vietnam.
This guy in Vietnam. You don't even get him started.
I think Vietnam, just because you're at a level where like technology advanced way beyond World War II, but it still was like a nitty-gritty, like you versus me type of thing.
Yeah, it was real.
Plus, like all the regulations that we had in the military nowadays, like dudes were fighting shirtless.
There was a lot of like personal modifications that people had to, like, you know, they give you the piece of equipment, and then you realize in the real world situation it's like this, so you change it, and you kind of change
you cut the sleeves off your BDUs and everything, and you just fought, right? You weren't there to do anything else besides fight the war.
I would have loved to have been like the Battle of Thermopylae, like the 300 Spartans against the entire Persian army. Yeah. To have the kind of mindset that they had, to the kind of fighting skill that they had, to know that you're basically marching to your death, but like Spartan culture, that it was all about being a warrior.
The coolest thing ever.
So that kind of mindset, I think, is very rare nowadays. You know, I would have liked to have put myself in that situation and kind of been that kind of Spartan warrior.
The Spartans embody warrior culture. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things about Spartan culture, and back then Greek, they did a lot of wazoo that you're like, I don't want to be part of that, but
maybe not that part.
Yeah, maybe not that part, but as far as just like breeding warriors, the Spartans were the elite of the elite. I would love to be a part of that, like brotherhood, but not like too brotherly, you know what I'm saying? Maybe not that segment of it. Different brotherly, but yeah, they definitely, that's a good one, man. Every time I watch 300, I get real jazzed up, and my fiance is like, calm down, man. And I'm like, no! Alrighty.
This one's for you, babe.
This one is for me. Among the enemies the U.S. military has had, which do you deem to have been the most admirable fighting force? I think the Japanese. We fought a lot of people because, you know, Americans fight around the world. But I think the Japanese were all, speaking of like embodying warrior culture and holding culture above yourself and like traditions, the Japanese bred some of the finest fighters the world has ever seen. I mean, looking back to the samurai and Bushido, the way of the warrior, they would literally take their own life than, you know, tradition or dishonor their families. And I just watched The Last Samurai the other day, and same, my fiance told me, calm down. And I was just like, no! Yeah, the Japanese, formidable fighting force, absolutely.
Well, you know, the arrowhead that is the shape of the patch for Special Forces is in honor of the Native American forces that we fought, that the American Army fought during westward expansion and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically in honor of it's unconventional warfare. And we were trying to use conventional tactics against a guerrilla, basically guerrilla warfare.
Yeah,
you know?
And they held their own, that's the thing.
Yeah, they held their own for a long time, you know. I think having that patch be in the shape of that arrowhead is kind of a way of showing admiration for the Native American forces back then, you know, Native American tribes and stuff. So that would be my answer. The Woolly Contracts.
The Woolly Contracts.
The Woolly Contracts would like to know, what's the longest you've gone without showering? Does it always stink? Or does your nose get used to it?
Oh, I can answer this question. Definitely the longest I've gone, maybe a week and a half in Ranger School. The Florida phase is your longest. FTX, it's 10 days straight, and you're not showering for that entire time. And you're sweating all day because it's hot and humid, or it's really, you know, tropical storms. The rain was the shower, or traveling through the river crossings, that was the shower. And, you know, it's actually quite interesting because you don't even notice you smell. But it's funny because, you know, when a lot of Ranger School graduates would go back to their unit, or we'd get guys back from Ranger School, they would legit smell for about 2 to 3 weeks after graduating from the school. They would just smell like ammonia. But you know, when you're in it, you don't smell it at all. You're like, what is this? But then when someone would come back, you're like, you smell like ammonia. And it's just because your body's eating itself from the starvation and the massive fat loss at a very fast pace. You know, when you're in a room with everybody, you just kind of get used to it.
You go through a lot of different training phases and stuff like that, and it's only certain parts of the military, certain training phases where you're actually out in the field for a long period of time. The longest period, I think, if I remember accurately, was actually during selection, because when we first got there was no hot water. Nobody would shower. Selection back when I took it was about 21 days, and they didn't turn on the hot water until day you got selected, you know? And so that was like after the final field training exercise or whatever, you came in and you got a shower. So it was about 20 days.
The stinky is, you know, a way of life.
You learn to like wash most stinky parts of the stinkiest parts of your body, you know? So you wash certain parts and that kind of takes care of most of the smell, and you don't really care about the rest.
This one comes from Fabian Guzman, and he wants to know, is there any song or kind of music that you guys heard to get motivated or hyped while on duty? Yeah, I mean, not particularly a specific artist, but I was a big metal music fan. You know, deathcore, metalcore, all that. That's real high-pitched screams and low gutturals. That stuff, yeah, that gets me pumped. I still listen to it to this day in the gym or when I'm trying to nap. I mean, I'll still blare it and just sleep like a baby.
That's awesome, man. I'm a very emotional person. Like, I get very emotionally.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about. I like associating, like, getting pumped up with, like, things that I've seen, like movies and video games and anime and stuff. So that would be, it was mostly soundtracks. You know, if I was in the gym, it'd be like anime soundtracks, movie soundtrack, you know, anything that I had a memory associated with, that would be what I would do. And then of course, when I was up north in Iraq, like when we would work out, it was all heavy metal stuff because I had no control over it. It was just like Paul and Tom, you know, they would put their heavy metals, and that it was like the same 6 songs over and over. They didn't ever change the playlist.
Yeah, I will say with the soundtrack, the movie soundtrack thing, that, you know, even to this day, I'll put on the Lord of the Rings, the Uruk-hai marching song. Dun, 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 when I'll put it on repeat while I'm rucking, and I just start
Imagine
going.
they're an orc chasing man flesh.
Literally, man flesh. You wanna hold it for me?
You wanna hold it for me?
Hold it for me, John. Let's see what else is next. What does it feel like to take a human life? Do you have any regrets? What I felt when I supposedly took a person's life was a lot of overpressure and a lot of recoil. You train for something like that. When it happened, we used a lot of mortar systems. Okay. On my deployment specifically, I've never seen a person through my optic and actively engage them and drop them like a sack of potatoes. That was the main goal. But you know, a lot of my, we call it confirmed kills in the Hollywood thing, but allegedly was through a 120 mortar system. And you know, that was almost like cheating to me, because I would compare it to if someone came up to you on the street and said, push this button and somebody will die. And I just went, and yeah, I mean, the ISR, which is like the eye in the sky where you can get, or a Raven, if you will, they put a Raven drone to get what's known as a BDA, so a battle damage assessment, to see if we effectively put those rounds on target. For me,
it goes without saying that when you're in combat arms unit, that is what you train to do. You train to close with and destroy the enemy. I had personally no moral qualms about what I might have to be called to do in a combat situation, but I was never presented with that opportunity. So I have, to my knowledge, never killed anybody, but I have a firm conviction that I would not feel any remorse.
That's the job.
Combat is a very simple equation, right?
It's very primitive.
You or me, yeah. So I would have done my job if that was what the situation I was presented with. Wait, there's one more. Okay, there's one more in there. Marius Schleicher, what is the most useless thing you learned during your service?
Treating people with respect. No, I'm kidding. I took a lot from my service where I'm like, this is not useless, because like radio communications, I think that's really important. You know, weapon manipulation, that's really important. Physical fitness, that's really important. Leadership style is super important. I guess like uniform standards was the most useless. In my opinion, uniform standards is a very garrison military thing to do. They say it breeds discipline, but I don't think it does anything for actually fighting capability.
Something that I had available to me that I just never used. In Iraq, they give you these little pamphlets that have like little Iraqi phrases, and like, I'm an American soldier, please help me. They give you like the blood, called a blood chit. It's little pieces of paper where you give this to somebody. If you get separated from your unit, you give it to like a local. If you return me back to my base, you will be rewarded, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Handsomely. But like, we always had a translator with us no matter where we went. If we went outside the wire, there was somebody with us that spoke the local languages.
Well, man, I think that concludes this episode of Interrogating Canada.
And just so you know, folks, really appreciate the questions. These were really good questions. Keep them coming, folks.
Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed listening to Izzy and I answer your questions. Remember, keep them coming. We want to keep doing this segment. I think it's super fun. But if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. Go down in the comments, ask us more questions that you want to see featured on future episodes of Interrogating Cam and Izzy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you stay up on the latest and greatest from all things Shift Fire. Thank you, Fire Team. We'll catch you on the next one. Don't send us pictures of your helmet.
But if you close your eyes.
See one?
Oh, I did that on purpose. I knew he was going to do that, so I was like, I'm going to wait.
Dave wasn't quite ready.
Yeah.
Again. A little higher, down, up, and then a little.
Ouch. Production burn.